Hello, 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 hello. Hi, everybody. I'm Laurie Ryan and the president of the Exton Region Chamber of Commerce. And I'd like to welcome you all now to our October In the Know for NPOs, Time to Pivot, What's Next? For people that don't know, the In the Knows for NPOs started about 4 years ago. It's a quarterly interactive presentation, and we hope that even virtual, you will be interactive. There is a chat area where you can ask questions. Stephanie Stevens is the one who will be moderating those questions. But before we get started, I would like to introduce our lovely, I can't do this. How do I get this? I would like to introduce Nancy Tuttle from Tuttle Marketing, who is our presenting sponsor for the entire series. And so Nancy, if you would, you have the floor.
Thanks, Laurie. First of all, I just am very honored to be the sponsor. I've been the sponsor last year and then all of this year. And this year's been interesting, but it's actually, I think these programs have been still wonderful. So we are a full service promotional marketing company that I guess you can see the screen that I'm seeing that has kind of our marketing specialists from A to Z. We have over 1 million products, anything that you can put your logo on to help promote your business. I feel like lately I'm in the mask business, I'm in the shipping business. Everything is, we do a lot of spirit wear for schools and teams, and since there's no, well, a lot of the schools are still remote, we are shipping their spirit wear individually to all of the people that order. And it's for virtual races, we're doing the same thing. So all the registrants, we're shipping out individual t-shirts so they can still have their shirts and you could still get your sponsors. So we're kind of had to regroup and reinvent ourselves, but it's been busy, it's been good. But we can't wait to get back to normal and do it the normal way. But we do any kind of promotion. We love working with nonprofits to get, to get more bang for your buck and to get yourself noticed. So if you have any upcoming needs, any events, anything that you need a promotional item for, please think of us. We'll be happy and would love to work with you. Thanks.
Thanks, Nancy. Sorry about that. My finger got a little too movable, but I will share with everybody the information for Nancy. Again, she has been a very long time member of the Exton Chamber of Commerce, has been in business now for 26 years, and is really committed to the nonprofit sector in Chester County, which a lot of our nonprofit council members are here today, even whether they're for-profit or nonprofit, really committed with the Exton Region Chamber of Commerce to support the nonprofits in the region.
I can interrupt for 1 second. I am not going to be able to stay on today, and I do apologize up front. I have an event tonight, my first event tonight for a nonprofit, so that I'm running. So I do need to run, but I so apologize, and it's good to see everybody, and hopefully the next one we can all have more time to talk, but thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Have a great event.
Yeah, good luck.
And we, as I mentioned earlier to the people that were here in the morning, we are very lucky to have a partnership with different organizations, and I think that is going to be a big key for all of us moving forward. One of those partners, and thank goodness for them, Chester County Community Foundation, Beth Harper Briglia, who's the CAP, who's the Executive Vice President of Philanthropy for the Chester County Community Foundation. If you would just say a few words about your organization.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see everyone. I think I know many people on this call, so we won't go into great detail. I also want to thank Stephanie Stevens, who's a member of the Exton Chamber Board, but who's also facilitating, I think, the workshop with Lori this morning. But Stephanie is our Director of Community Engagement and our Grants Manager at this point in time. So the Chester County Community Foundation, we are a philanthropic nonprofit organization. Our tagline is connecting people who care with causes that matter. And I always tell people on a good day, we get to do that. We hold over 400 charitable, what they call donor advised funds. These are individual and family funds where an individual or family has placed monies at the community foundation. And then we work with those families and individuals to gift out monies to various different nonprofits of their choice. And we're very honored to do that. We are an endowed organization with those funds. We are designed to last forever to be able to support Chester County-based nonprofits forever. And of course, our donors can support nonprofits that are outside of Chester County. But we're really pleased to be a co-promoting, presenting sponsor today. I've known Nadya for a long time and her work. And in this time, as nonprofits consider next steps and look at their business model and what makes sense, this is an area that we're deeply engaged in from a community foundation's perspective. And so we're pleased to welcome Nadya to the session today. And then I also want to mention briefly that on Tuesday afternoons for the next several weeks, we at the Community Foundation and with many partners on this call actually are presenting what we call our Food for Thought series, which are addressing various different topics of interest to nonprofits at this time. So I will put the information in the chat box, but you are all more than welcome to join. And thank you so much. This is a great topic and I look forward to Nadya's remarks.
Thanks, Beth. We also have another presenting sponsor with us today, Priscilla Luce. Luce. Okay, I thought that's what it was and I messed it up. I should have asked you before we started. She's the interim president and CEO of the Greater Philadelphia Alliance, and we welcome you today. And if you could just say a few words about your organization.
Well, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I think many of you knew Maud Lyon, who retired at the end of July, and I am the interim president. We, just so everyone knows, we are searching for a new president and CEO. But in the meantime, I'm keeping the fires burning. We are the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance is a group membership organization, more than 450 arts and cultural organizations in Philadelphia and the 5 counties surrounding area. And right now, in the midst of the tremendous upheaval that we're all going through, our primary purpose is to provide information and resources to our members that will help them get through this time and triumph on the other side of it. So we are delighted to help sponsor this wonderful event. And I also look forward very much to Nadya's remarks.
Thank you. We did have a lot of registrants from your organization, so your reach goes far. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And again, this is being recorded right now, so I think it should be recording.
It is.
Yep, so that will be great. Do we want to stop? No. Okay. So finally, why we're here. I would like to introduce Nadya Shmavonian, who's the director of the Nonprofit Repositioning Fund and a partner at Seachange Capital Partners. She has been very involved over the past many years with helping nonprofits. And I would like to proudly present and introduce Nadya to the group. So let's take it over there.
Nope, she's mute.
There we go. I still get that wrong almost every time. I'm Nadya Shmavonian, and thank you all for this. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Lori, and to the Community Foundation and GPCA and Priscilla. Yes, I will set up a meeting with you next week. I got your email yesterday. Sorry. I appreciate every opportunity to speak about the Greater Philadelphia Nonprofit Repositioning Fund because we aim to serve organizations in all 5 counties. And I'm particularly pleased when I can get out to Chester County and out of Philadelphia and reach as many folks as I can. And, hopefully most of the people on this Zoom have heard of the Repositioning Fund, but I will take a minute or two just to give you some background on who we are, how we work, why we're there, and what we're hoping for the future. And I think given kind of the size of the call, which is relatively manageable compared to some that we've all been engaged in, I'm hoping we can make this somewhat conversational and interactive. And I'm actually really thrilled that GPCA has somehow pulled in a number of cultural folks, because I do think that community has been hit harder than most in terms of what's going on with COVID-19 and the inability to stay open, or at least until recently stay open and earn revenue that everyone has counted on. So maybe if just quickly show the first slide, Lori, which is just to give you a sense of who has supported the fund. We are, I joined the fund in July 2015. And there were a number of foundations in the greater Philadelphia region who had been working to think about, if it works, it works. We'll see. But it just, I would be remiss if I didn't share who our funders are and give you a sense of kind of the breadth of that group. A group of funders, which was not as large as this one, the one with the foundations. Nah. There you are. The group of funders came together with a desire to set up an arm's length removed fund where they could pool their resources and hire somebody, in this case it turned out to be me, to help them re-grant to the community to experiment with and support the concept that 2 or more nonprofits can come together, and sometimes it can allow them to do more than they could do alone. It is by no means an answer or a fix for everybody, but this work of what we call now sustained collaboration, which means permanent long-term changes to the business model of 2 or more nonprofits, feels more important than ever. And I think all of us, we've got 2 more funders who are going to join us for our 3rd round of funding, which starts in January. I can't quite announce who they are, but it's been very heartening doing the fundraising for the next round, because I think everyone recognizes that the 5 years of getting ourselves into the community, trying to normalize the strategic consideration of sustained collaborations among both funders as well as nonprofits has put us in a position where, in this very challenging time, hopefully we can be that much more of a central resource for organizations that are thinking about a fundamental redo or repositioning of their organization. We can turn the slide off for now. And so thank you. We have made, in the 5 years that we've been in business, I believe it's 63 grants for about $1.5 million. And those grants are always to pairs of organizations that are either exploring a possible sustained collaboration, which can be anything from shared back office arrangement, a programmatic joint venture, merger, acquisition, asset transfer. So we give money to a lead organization, which then, frankly, passes all of that money through to third-party vendors who help them in that due diligence process. We also make grants for implementation. They're one-time implementation costs. You don't need to have had an exploratory grant in order to get an implementation grant, but the implementation grants are really, I say to people all the time, these are probably the most unsexy grant dollars in the universe. They are the nuts and bolts of what it takes to put 2 organizations together in some form or another. So it could be something as riveting as shared IT platforms, or smoothing HR benefits, or figuring out how to break a lease so that they can come together in a meaningful way. But honestly, those things matter. They cost money, and you need to go through that exercise. So I think it's, I think it's a wonderful thing that there is this strange resource that nonprofits can turn to if they are in the business of executing these kinds of transactions. Our exploratory grants, I also say to people, I think they are some of the highest leverage grants one can make. We average grants of about $25,000, so they're not large investments, but what they do provide, and I've said to my board on many occasions, the board is representatives from each of those funders. So it's a really interesting, we'll talk about that room and what that's like. But the exploratory grants, they're not a lot of money, but they do provide a pause for nonprofits to actually go through a thoughtful process before they jump into a marriage with another organization. And we consider a good process that ends in the decision for the two or more organizations to walk away to be just as important and valuable as the ones that actually lead on to a formal transaction. And the reason I say that is for any of you who have been through, and I'm interested to hear when we have discussion, if any of you have been through let's say a merger, the amount of time that draws on an executive director or president is extraordinary, and the board chairs and the senior staff, and then the anxiety that may produce for everyone on board. So if you go into one of those deals and it has not been well thought through, a bad collaboration is far worse than no collaboration at all. So this allows nonprofits a little bit of the luxury that for-profits have, which is, they have ample working capital that they can draw upon when they are looking at this as a strategic opportunity. And, I think nonprofits, the wisdom of this model is that it allows for nonprofits to have a bit of that. The other piece of the model that I want to emphasize, and I know when we've done our first evaluation, it came out as one of the most valued elements of this programming model, is that in my role as the director of the fund, I am set up apart from the foundations. Yes, I report to them, and I distill what I've learned, what I'm hearing, present grant recommendations to them maybe 7 or 8 times a year. But I may be in conversations with a given pair of organizations or a given leader for, sometimes years before my board ever knows who it is I'm talking to. And that sense of a confidential, safe space for nonprofits to access just advice, counsel, and frankly, an ear to listen to them as they are struggling with whatever that repositioning challenge is, I think is a really invaluable part of this model. And the funders were very thoughtful about this. They even wouldn't put me in one of their offices when we first started, because they didn't want me to be having a meeting with a couple of nonprofit leaders that suddenly the program officers there or whoever would start speculating, why are they visiting with the Repositioning Fund? And so that's been important. I also have worked very hard, again, at the governance committee's kind of model, to be completely neutral. I am by no means ever pushing organizations together. I don't do matchmaking. I always say I'm not a Yenta. I am there to receive pairs of folks that come to us and to provide whatever guidance I can. And I think that's also an important part of the model, because the funders themselves in no way want to be pushing consolidation. They just want to be providing an impartial resource, a safe place to test the concept of what it might do to your programmatic outcomes, to your community benefit, to your organizational or mission sustainability to come together. And they really don't want to prejudge who that is, who that should be, or why they should do it. And the final part I'll say about this model is what it does do is, so I've got 10 funders, it centralizes the learning from each of these transactions in our offices. And if you think about it, if William Penn Foundation did 2 or 3 of these, Barra Foundation did, 4 or 5, Philadelphia Foundation did a few, it's dispersed, whereas we are centrally managing it, and we are learning from that experience and feeding that back up to all of those foundations. But it is not, I certainly have gotten smarter over the years about what I'm looking for and how to approach these projects. And then the final thing, there's probably a lot that I haven't covered, but the final thing I want to mention is that so Greater Philadelphia has this fund, but we modeled it pretty closely, or the funders initially modeled it after a fund that was managed by Seachange Capital, where I am now a partner in New York City, as well as, and when I got there, I completely borrowed everything they had there. I borrowed everything that they had in Los Angeles, and both of those funds had started coming out of the last Great Recession in 2012. And they were a response to challenges like we are facing now in the nonprofit sector. And this was viewed as a meaningful way to support nonprofits in looking at their options and helping provide extra fortification for those efforts. So, when I was starting, there was also at the time, there was a fund in Boston. And the way I got my policies and procedures and grant agreements and everything structured was by calling each of those folks and kind of doing this, whisper down the alley process. And for the last several years, part of my other life has been trying to build a national movement to make this acceptable for other communities to experiment with. And I'm really thrilled that we have, in May, we finally launched with national funding a network called the Sustainable Collaboration Network. And I'll give you the coordinates for it later, which at present has 7 different cities across the country as members. And we as a team are on a monthly basis comparing notes. We're sharing now with Zoom. We're actually sharing consultants, right? I mean, so it used to be if I didn't have enough of a certain kind of consultant in the Philadelphia market, I was stuck in terms of where people could go, how they could get the advice they needed. Somewhere around April, we were in a meeting and it occurred to us, oh my gosh, I could just as easily access somebody in Los Angeles and refer them to nonprofits in this region. And as long as we're, inside as we are, why not? And, lawyers different because of, whatever the Commonwealth's laws are different than maybe in California. But it's been an incredible group, and we've had a lot of really interesting write-ups about it. And we're all right now being overwhelmed by inquiries, not yet as much from the nonprofits. We've all been sort of prepared for the onslaught in the COVID-19 aftermath. But we're starting to get a tremendous amount of interest, well, certainly from the media, but from funders and absolutely from technical assistance providers who can read the writing on the wall and know that this is a place that they can and may be really very fully engaged in the future. And final word before I open it up, we all are also engaged in conversations about whether we can, and all of us are now open to supporting in select instances dissolution support. So that would be the only place where it's not 2 or more organizations coming together, but it's a recognition. Again, if you look at the for-profit world, there are business cycles, and this is obviously an extreme cycle nonprofits are in. But if there's any way we can be supportive as organizations go through that passage, we all want to be part of that repositioning as well, even though it's certainly not, but there are ways in which you can dissolve an organization and sustain your organizational mission and legacy if you're proactive about it. And I can say that only because I closed a national nonprofit in 2010 or 2012, excuse me. And I was the most painful part of my entire professional career, but I also felt very strongly about doing that with kind of head above board and openly. And I think that those are, you know, like it or not, that's going to be part of some of the nonprofit sector's future. So we're kind of a wonderful hotbed community, but collaboration's what we're about. Happy to share more about how we do, what we value, whatever questions might be on your minds.
So we actually had a question come in with registration, and I'd like to kick it off with that one. The first, there's actually a few of them, but let's start with the first one. What have you seen in nonprofit repositioning that's led to success with board and staff? Like, are there any things that kind of come up in your mind?
Well, so I guess, and again, the repositioning we engage in is all about this collaborative model. What is most successful is one, a strong board staff relationship, so that the board chair actually understands almost at a visceral level, what is that organization, you know, what makes that organization tick, what are some of the most important program lines, how are they focused on achieving mission, and so on. And I think in terms of the nonprofits and where and how in this quest for sort of sustainability in a very shifting sand, it is unrelenting clarity about mission and what is vital to achieving that mission. So frankly, it is sometimes winnowing down, you know, it's really pausing, reflecting, board and staff. You know, yes, we've got a wonderful, you know, flurry of programs and activities, but in a cash challenged moment and in a shifting sand moment where we don't know where this is all going to end externally, we need to be clear as possible about what our mission is, what's the driving force, what is central to that, and what is really more ancillary, and double down on the centrality and make some hard choices about, you know, what might be on the periphery. And in that process, that's where the partnership opportunity can be particularly vital, because if you really stick to your knitting and you know what that is, what's non-negotiable about your organization, and but at the same time, what would provide you with some complementary assets that you could build on, knowing how those, you know, puzzle pieces fit together prepares you very well to be open to one of these partnerships that might emerge.
Steph, can I ask you a question? Because, so how does that process start? Like, so the board and the staff all together and they look at what's going on. I'm sorry if you can't hear me very well. But so how long does it usually take before they come and talk with you?
So, you know, the old adage about funders, which is you've seen one funder, you've seen one funder, you've seen one nonprofit collaboration, you've seen one nonprofit collaboration. You know, I've had people come in who, because they had either prior experience or just a match made in heaven, whatever, they've come in very quickly and they have a very strong board staff relationship. They've come in and are ready to run within a couple months. You know, like they've gotten it as far as they can go, and they're ready to really contemplate a merger. They've got maybe pro bono attorneys that are helping them on their boards, whatever that might look like, and they're ready to strike, but they've got X, Y, and Z issues they still have to knock down. And there are others that I've been in conversations with, again, for years, and they're mulling and they're thinking. And it just varies. I'll give you one of the very first two grants I made in December of 2015. And so they were both what I considered to be hand in glove opportunities. I mean, just, oh my gosh, this group wants to, you know, is primarily in Philadelphia. They really want to get out into the suburban regions. This suburban agency has licensure provisions that they can share with this Philadelphia, blah, blah, blah. It looked like an amazing deal. And we gave them our first exploratory grant, and they hired a consultant who started taking them through the process of the senior staff and board, gridding out what would that look like if they were to merge. And about 3 or 4 months into it, I got the call saying, no, it's not going to go. We realized that the smaller group didn't like the concept that they were going to be, quote, acquired. And that was problematic for them. They hadn't really faced into that before they started the process, and they're withdrawing. And that's when I was absolutely panicked and called my most experienced board member who has funded these things around the country. And she said, it's okay, that's a good outcome, but I was a little panicked. But what was interesting is that the larger organization of the two, that was it. We got whatever little bit of money back, and they called it a day. And then about a year later, that larger organization came back to us and said, all right, we took all those tools that we learned in that first due diligence process. We're ready to jump to implementation with an entirely different group. And that one, they were ready to roll. We gave them the grant. It was a pretty seamless, to the extent these things ever are seamless, pretty seamless collaboration. They effected the merger in very swift order. And it was just kind of an interesting, journey. And I think that's the kind of journey that you have. And again, if you think about the for-profit world, it's not an unusual thing to go through merger considerations. It's just it's as routine as thinking about succession planning. It's what boards and senior staff do, or at least are supposed to do. And in the nonprofit world, we've been talking for well over a decade about how vital it is for nonprofits to start, make sure they're having regular conversations about succession planning and so on. Doesn't mean that they do it that much, but this to me is the same thing. It ought to be just a routine consideration once a year or so, that folks in the boardroom have that discussion. And I had, when I first started with the fund, I was on a national board, and we were having one of our annual retreats, and I asked the question, I said, well, have we ever thought about who we might partner with, including naming the organization that they, routinely perceived as the greatest competitor? And, to me, the folks who are your greatest competitors are sometimes the first place you should look if you are really serious about trying to find an effective partnership that might extend your community impact. After I introduced that to this very progressive crowd, supposedly, you could hear a pin drop. It was about 5 minutes before anyone's heart started again. And and I would do it every year from then on, because it seemed like it's just, why not? Why don't we? And I think there's a lot about mission and the sacrosanct nature of mission that, it's the juice and the energy and the blood flow that I think every good nonprofit leader is inspired by. But it's very hard to step back from that mission and imagine, encompassing or complementing your work with another organization. It's more personal, I think, than it is in business, and for good reasons, but it makes it in some ways trickier to get there.
Thank you. Another question from the group is indicators of trouble. What should board and staff, for that matter, be kind of on the lookout for?
Well, I've already touched on, what we fondly refer to as mission creep, right? And it's very hard in difficult times not to be compelled by, the temptation of trying to meet a funder's guidelines, even if they're really not core to who you are. And I will say, this region is somewhat challenged in terms of how much, just it does not have as rich a philanthropic base as some other communities. So that's a key issue. The other, of course, another indicator, which is the hardest one to deal with, is having a board that really doesn't know what's going on fully, is not engaged, does not understand or appreciate how the programs relate to the financial model of the organization, and so are not providing the kind of accountability or guidance that on a good day every ED is strengthened and grows and held accountable in important ways that improve their leadership. On a bad day, everyone anyone who's ever led an organization just wants to call it a day with their board, but that's a really important indicator. And then, cash flow. Cash is king, particularly in challenging moments, and understanding and just looking with eyes wide open at what you really have available, and not deceiving yourself and not engaging in what we call, we refer to at Seachange as magical thinking, that when it feels like a crunch time, do not just immediately say, yeah, we just have to double down on our fundraising. Yes, you have to do that. But if it hasn't gotten you where you need to get to yet, unless there's a very explicit opportunity, don't deceive yourself, and look and also understand that if you are getting into a precarious financial situation over some length of time, that it's not just a blip because of an immediate loss of a funder that maybe you can replenish. That things happen fast, right? So to the extent you can figure out now how much running room you have, it will light a fire for you and the board in thinking about your options, including fundraising. It probably put a greater fire under everybody's seat in terms of fundraising, but also looking at, are there things that we need to pare down? So again, we get to our mission focus. Are there partnerships we should be engaged in, so that rather than us spending all these resources on X, Y, or Z, we could find a complementary asset where, and it's not even our strength, it's not even our core sweet spot. We could find somebody else who can partner with us on that, and so on. But it's really just being brutally honest with yourselves about your financial model, your financial assets, your running room, and making decisions while you can, so that you are in the driver's seat, as opposed to someone else stepping in and taking that over. I will say to you, and this is what probably people don't want to hear this, but I'll say it anyway. When I was running this organization, Public-Private Ventures, which was nationally well known, I used to make grants to them way back in the day. And when before it became clear, I was hired with the notion that there'd be some measure of turnaround, but it was sort of underplayed how much turnaround was needed. And really spent the next year working with the team, coming up with a radical way of looking at our programs, our mission, and revitalizing, inspiring. It was really very exciting times. We presented that report to my board in January, a year after I had started. And we had a great conversation about this document, this plan. We were ready to roll. And at the very end of the day, a board member who was not in the stinking room with us, who was on the phone from the Harvard Business School, said, well, Nadya, this is all exciting. Have you ever looked to see how much it would cost to responsibly dissolve the organization? And I had to look at my vice presidents who were in the room with me and just pray they would not jump out the window or throw the phone or walk out on me right then and there. And I was furious with this gentleman because we were really pushing this out publicly. It was where all of our energy was going. But I went home that weekend. I called lawyers. I called financial people and did that calculation. And then that number became like kind of a constant in our financial planning. We knew that if we ever got close to that line, we had a decision to make, because once we dipped below that amount, we would lose our ability to make a decision about what to do. And it was a whole nother awful year of everything before, and, you know, very heady on the one hand and very awful in other ways, because we had to winnow down, we had to lay off staff, all this kind of stuff. And then we got right up close to that number and made the decision to responsibly wind down the organization. But by doing that, we were able to transfer research projects to a whole number of different foundations and organizations. So studies that had been in place for 7-8 years, those kids, their research and so on lived on. Every one of our staff members, we were able, in the 15 weeks of winding down, we were able to place them. Our 35-year body of literature and publications went to the Foundation Center and it is now kind of public access. It exists. These are the silly things you don't think about, but like if you just close, those things are lost. So your mission is done. And this, in effect, allowed us to move forward. Move forward without being an organization. So that again, it was just knowing. In a perfect world, somebody would have asked that question 3 or 4 years before that, because we could have merged with the right organization. But by the time we got to that reality, it was too late. So and as I said, it happens really fast. So they're just being very open and honest with yourselves.
That's good. Any questions for the audience?
I have a couple of questions, actually.
Yeah. Can you introduce yourself? Thank you.
Sure. My name's Ann Garner. I'm the managing director at Interact Theater Company in Philadelphia.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I guess a couple of questions specifically about your organization, Repositioning Fund, which what do you think, what is the best way to approach you? Like, do you start with a conversation, or do you start with an application that then, you talk about? And then when you're talking about the kinds of collaborations, are you talking about full organizational sort of collaborations or mergers or acquisitions only, or are sort of large project or large new models also part of that conversation?
Okay, well, I'll start, I'll start with the easier part, which is how to approach. And so the way I tell everyone is send me an email, and that at the end, we've got Lori's got a slide, or Stephanie's got the slide that shows the contact information. Send me an email and ask for a call. And I will do a 30-minute, we'll schedule a 30-minute call. It could be, ideally, it's you and somebody else if you're thinking about a collaboration. But honestly, I think anyone who's looking at their organizational repositioning and trying to look around the corner and has strategic questions, I'm always happy to take individual calls. And I will not invite a proposal until or unless I've had a call where both sides are represented. But the first call you can just lay out what's going on or questions you have and so on. And again, I completely keep those conversations confidential. My board does not know who's in my pipeline ever. They only know when an actual grant recommendation is before them, because they will not make a decision on where their money goes without knowing who's involved in the transaction. But, as I said, it could be years before they know that, you and I are in a conversation, or you and X other organization are in a conversation. In terms of what kinds of transactions do we engage in, I could try to show a slide. I would give myself maybe 15 seconds to share the screen. But I will say, just as a preface to that, and we'll see how it goes. And if not, I'll make sure it gets sent out to you after. I have always talked about this as big C collaboration versus small C collaboration. I've spent most of my career in the foundation world, and for the last 2 decades, there's been a tremendous push for nonprofit, what I call small C collaboration, which is, you should be doing a summer festival with another performing arts organization. And have you thought about how you can do that together and informally? But it's, a great way to learn from each other. It's got all kinds of benefits to it. And frankly, I will say small C collaboration is a tremendous predictor of potentially, a more formal transaction down the road, because you will have known each other and gotten to know each other trying to execute something. But we take everything, we take inquiries for everything. Well, let's see if I can do this. I'm going to do a share screen. And here we go. Let me get this. Well, it's going to be, do people see that?
Yes.
Okay. So let me see. This might help. All right. So there we are. So the informal short term is, sort of not quite in our bailiwick, but again, it's important. I think there is the one thing I would say. This is a chart that we developed with our colleagues in the other cities. We are open to what I would call alliances, which are very formal agreements among a number of organizations that start to get into things like co-location, back when people had locations, right? To shared staffing. And actually, we had supported the Equal Justice Center in Philadelphia, which, because of a co-location of 13 legal aid groups, and I just saw this week that has collapsed because of the people aren't investing in office space right now for good reason. But you get into what the shared service arrangements, which are, really important ways to test and or gain some efficiencies with 2 or more organizations. And then you get into the really formal, full, collaboration where you're fully integrating your organizations whether through merger, acquisition, asset transfer. Sometimes there is one organization that transfers its assets and dissolves into another. But, this is sort of the continuum that we think of. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from the group?
Can I just share a quick story with the merger? And it ended up very well. But my name's Fred Cerrone with Fred Cerrone Company, Certified Public Accountants in Exton, PA. Work with a lot of youth groups, and 2 strong personality groups, youth sports group, tried to get together. 5 years to put it together, and 18 months later, it was pulled apart. When you're starting to see things like, hey, we have to have the uneven board number going our way.
Right.
2 strong personalities for presidents. Board members from each side, backstabbing and trying to make things, stealing employees from each side. It looked like it should have been made in heaven. A perfect organization. Each side came with a lot of strengths. They did a joint venture first, see how that worked. That worked pretty good. But when you started mixing all the assets and all the board members and who had to have 5 versus 6 and the whole number, it unwound pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But the nice part about it is both organizations are striving. It's kind of funny because what's that old saying? The people that start the revolution aren't the ones that finish it.
Yeah.
So the group has, both sides have turned over their board members and things are moving forward. So it was a nice story, but it was very, very sad because children, sports people were affected.
Yeah.
What group to go to? Go to this group, go to that group. Where's my child going to get more exposure for possible scholarships, whether it's female, whether it's male? There was a lot of backroom jockeying, and it was sad. It was really, really sad. But in the long run, it worked out good for both organizations to unwind it and just stay apart. You
Yeah.
stay on your, you stay in your lane, we'll stay in our lane.
And Fred, you actually touch on what, if I had to say, what is the single greatest theme in terms of these deals that blow up, some, often preferably before they get transacted. But in terms of our exploratory processes, where do these things blow up? It is most often at the board level. And, the EDs, and you all, are one way or another in those leadership roles. The EDs understand, as I said, viscerally, why you're contemplating some kind of a transaction. Board members, in a perfect world, your board chair is working closely enough with you to understand why and to be a champion of what needs to happen or what the vision is for a potential collaboration. That doesn't happen all the time. And sometimes board members are a little too far removed. And then it becomes more of an issue of ego. Will I be the chair? Will she be the chair? And or even, could be the audit committees. It's and I don't mean to minimize that those things matter, and people serve, and they serve on a voluntary basis because they care deeply. And boards often, they feel like, they're they are loyal to mission in some ways, to a fault, and they take that duty very, very seriously, and they can't imagine that service to the mission could extend to broader organizational boundaries, right? Like, it doesn't begin and end at your organization, but it's a fundamental kind of mindset shift that is hard to achieve. And again, it comes down to how closely are the board chair and the ED working together, and how much does the board chair really understand the business challenges and the opportunities that might be afforded by going through this hard journey. And I've had EDs sort of say to me that first year, if you do a full merger, at least that, leading up to it, and then the first year that you're in it, it takes at least a full day, a week of their time. And, we all know that nonprofit leaders are typically juggling 4 jobs because the pressure financially and otherwise is great. So, I don't say don't ever step into a merger planning or effort and do it lightly, right? Like, this is a serious commitment, but you need your board with you, because the boards can blow it up in some pretty spectacular ways sometimes.
Looks like Laurie may have a question.
Thank you. Have you ever dealt with organizations who the founding, the executive is the founding or related to the founding person for that organization, and trying to convince them that there might be an opportunity for this organization to exist by merging? Like, have you ever dealt with any of those where there's a lot of, legacy involved that they don't give up?
Well, yes, I have. I would say, and interestingly, Lori, the vast majority of any mergers we've been engaged in. So there are three presenting issues that most commonly lead people to my door, right? One is a planned leadership transition, or an ongoing leadership transition. 2 is some kind of regulatory change, and this is particularly in health and human services. There may be some shifting external factors that suggest there's power in numbers or scale or whatever. And then 3, loss of a significant funding stream for one of the organizations, where it just becomes clear, oh my God, we can't stand up the back office if we've just been cut, from this unrestricted support and so on. Our programs still matter. We've got to find a way to complement another organization, but benefit from their administrative structure. Leadership transitions, and particularly founders, and we have a lot of them in the greater Philadelphia region who have been around for a long, long time. And, I tell people, my gosh, there is no, if you've got one of these long time, charismatic, amazing leaders, as a board member, if that person indicates they are fine, they are ready to leave, before you rush out and do the search, look under, take some time. If you can find an interim leader, do so, and take the time to get the help you need to look under the hood, because what that person did for the last 30 years has been heroic and important and vital to the DNA of the organization. But you need to dispassionately step back and say, okay, this is the market and the world now. What skills do we need? And at the same time you're doing that assessment, look at, is there another way to do this? Maybe this is the moment and opportunity and time where we should actually engage in those conversations we have thought about or played with another organization. Maybe we don't replace Joe. Maybe we actually look at moving forward in some different creative way with another organization. So to me, that's such a vital moment in an organization's life, and particularly now with all the crazy uncertainty, to really, again, dispassionately stand back, look at what the organization needs, both in terms of leadership and or partnership.
I believe, Pam, you have a question?
Yes. Hi. Thank you, Nadia. My name is Pam Leland. I know many of you, but I'm a consultant that works with boards around strategy and transition change issues. And to follow up on what your comment earlier about what happens and why these break down, I think one of the things in my experience is that many board members don't appreciate the larger accountability they have to the public. Mm-hmm. And that they think their job is to protect the organization, right, the staff, the particular programs. And when I engage boards in that conversation of that larger public accountability and the reason you get tax exempt status to start with, it is surprising to me at a couple levels. One, because many boards have not had that conversation. So there's a lack of board education out there. But it also, I think, and I'll say this word a little carefully, but I think it scares them a little because they haven't thought about, that's why the big question of should we continue to exist as an independent organization hasn't been considered, because they don't understand that their job is not to protect their particular people, it's to protect the work that is being done. And that begs the question of, are we the best way to do that as an independent nonprofit? And I find the fear factor one of the biggest barriers to helping boards think strategically. Because
I couldn't have said it better, Pam. It's at that public accountability issue and just the lack of imagination. That again, it's mission first. And mission does not mean organizational walls, and being creative about that. And I've done a lot of work with Ann Wallestad, who leads Board Source, and they have done a great job in kind of building out. And folks are interested in building out resources through their Power of Possibility campaign, which is all about this. That the possibilities are. There are many ways to fulfill your public accountability responsibility that are going to look different. So I thank you for sharing that perspective. It is, and the other piece as you were speaking, I have winnowed. I am very, at this point, I've winnowed myself down to one nonprofit board, which is I have been on so many in my career, and they take enormous time, and you are volunteering. And another kind of barrier to this, and this is, you never hear people admit this, but if you're already giving a ton of your time to a nonprofit board, and then there's this discussion of, let's look at a merger possibility. Let me tell you, you are going to spend a whole lot of time and, you know, out of your hide. It's, you know, nights, weekends, whatever the heck, and, you know, it's not your primary job. That's not an insignificant factor, right? I mean, no one's paying them to go through this. You know, it's a very, again, very different than the for-profit world, right? That they're just different incentives. And I think sometimes that, and there's fatigue because there aren't, you know, they're really, because most, if you go through the number of nonprofits, I mean, there's one point I went through this, I was sort of, okay, there were maybe 15,000 nonprofits in the region. And if each one has 12 members or whatever the math I did, it was like, well, that means there are 90,000 nonprofit board seats that need to be filled. That means that any given person who's worth their salt is going to get tapped to be on a whole lot of boards at once. And that's, you know, tremendous time and responsibility. So again, nonprofits are sort of anything we can do to help raise awareness, as you just have done, and then support organizations and leaders who are trying to navigate these waters is what I care about. And I actually, on the chart I had showed you, and I didn't do my soapbox speech, but I'm going to do that here too, since I have the floor. Fiscal sponsorship. So the only nonprofit that I have decided to stay with right now is something called Social Impact Commons, which is all about helping to incubate and promote and educate about the value of quality fiscal sponsorship. We've all heard of stories where it's just not well managed, or it's kind of rape and pillage and just, but if you really look at this notion of mission first, there is some logic to a smaller organization. Let's just take the arts. You know, you've got a dance company, and, you know, I date an artist, so I understand the sort of the mindset around this. Like, my dance form is the dance form, and there's no way I'm going to partner with another organization. That may be true, but your dance form, you are a dancer and you're a brilliant artist. Do you really want to be in the care and feeding of the IRS or of your bookkeepers or whatever? And could you find a home where you might be side by side with other dance companies or performing arts organizations, but benefiting from this platform that can allow you to do 90% of your time on mission, you know? And it's just, and as I look at the future for the nonprofit sector, I think the work we do is important, but that's transaction by transaction. But I really look at fiscal sponsorship as a vital way to allow for continued expression of mission without necessarily having the redundancy of 15 different, you know, CFOs and IT people and so on. And, you know, but it has to be quality. And so that's something I care deeply about, again, you know, as part of the solution set coming out of this pandemic nonsense, right? So I said it.
Nadja, I have a question from Michelle. She's asking, are there learning resources out there that you can share, blogs, et cetera, about organizational leadership change that you know of?
Well, I think, you know, I would say board source, again, if you think about the role of trustees, they have to preside over organizational leadership transition. So, you know, look at their website. I would also just, you know, we'll make a plug, you know, when we leave or however you want to share it. The final slide that I had was, you know, just how to reach me for those 30-minute intakes, but also the Repositioning Fund's website, but this national sustained collaboration network that I'm helping to coordinate, which where all of us from the different cities have pooled together resources. We're still building, you know, the repository of best practices, but there are some elements around leadership change. And I know I should be thinking of key nonprofits that are doing this work. I would start with Board Source and build out from there, but and then frankly, we don't have that much there. So I'll stop. I think those are good places to start.
Okay. What's keeping you up at night? You know? And during these times, I know there's a lot, but could you possibly narrow it down maybe?
Yeah, there is a lot. It's that 4 a.m. thing. What's keeping me up at night? I am concerned that there's still this sort of degree of head in the sand, and that the other shoe has not fully dropped in terms of what the implications of the disruption we have all been through and are still in and probably will go back into somehow, and how that impacts nonprofits. I mean, I know that I've been involved in different kind of relief efforts, and I think those are all vital, but I am concerned that folks are not staring into this eyes wide open. So that's a big piece of it. And I am deeply concerned for and, you know, at the same time, nonprofits are more challenged than ever. And I will be the first person to say, I don't think it was working before. I think the pressures that nonprofit leaders are under, the financial constraints, what it means to fundraise, and you know how that pulls you apart in so many different ways. I don't think that was working so great before this, and it is that much more challenging now, and the demand for services, particularly health and human services, could not be greater. So it's just such a terrible imbalance. It just worries me about the fabric of society and the safety nets. And so those, I mean, it's meta stuff, but I do, and also I will just say this, I teach nonprofit governance here and there. And one of the things that I find myself at the end of every course and throughout it saying is nonprofits matter. And, particularly I teach a lot of Wharton students, and everyone's got their next, social enterprise they're going to take on. And it's all great energy, but it's sort of, let's just leapfrog over all these folks who have been working in, on the ground, in the trenches for generations and have a lot of learning. And yeah, guess what? They don't always work that efficiently, because you try running something on a budget like these folks do. And, I just worry that I worry about talent and talent drain at a time when we need those great minds and leaders and committed public servants, if you will, helping us to work with nonprofits and helping them to survive and for their missions to survive. So that worries me probably long-term more than anything is, how are we capturing the next generation to be engaged and contributing to this sector?
Thank you. Those are great.
So I don't get a lot of sleep.
I'm going to turn things over at Lori at this point. Lori?
Yes, thank you, Steph. And thank you, Nadya. I probably always say it wrong. I'm going to share that
Okay.
I'm going to share that picture for everybody.
I am the only Nadya Shmavonian in the book. You can find me that way too.
Okay, here's the contact information. Oh, you can't see it though, can you?
Not yet.
Anyway.
While you're doing that, Joe, did you have a question?
I did not, no.
Okay.
Are you seeing my screen yet? No. Can you see that? No?
Almost.
There we are. Now it's there. It's got a backdrop. Yep. Right. So there's you had it.
So close.
Yeah. There you go. So the first is, the Repositioning Fund itself, good place to start. You'll get a sense of what we're looking for in proposals. We have an online application. You can only apply after you've consulted with me and I've invited an application. Sustainedcollab.org is the national network that I referred to. Again, there's some good resources there that might be, and we have resources for funders, resources for nonprofits. and resources for boards. And then my email is nshmavonian@seachangeCap.org, one of the longest emails in history. But please don't hesitate to reach out if you want to set up a time to talk.
And I really thank you for this. I do serve on a number of boards besides running the Exton Region Chamber of Commerce. And you really, I don't know if you help 501c6s too, but no, I think what you've provided is very valuable. And I look forward to sharing this with people on this call, but with others as well. You do so much great work. And I just wanted to end this this conversation, if no one has anything else to say, by introducing you to Bill Friedman, who is the chair of the Nonprofit Council and also on the board of the Exton Region Chamber of Commerce. He works for Blue Dog Printing and Design, but we have come up with our slate of topics for next year, building on this time to pivot. You know, now that once we get through 2020, what is 2021 what are we going to need as nonprofits? So Bill, would you just want to give a little bit of what we're going to be doing?
Sure. Thanks, Laurie. This is a great program. I really enjoyed this. We are already hard at work planning for our programming for next year. We don't know if it's all going to be virtual, if it's going to be in person. We're going to wait and see what happens. But as of right now, we just met a couple weeks ago, and our 4 programs, and these are always up. We still have to decide exactly what these programs are going to look like, who our speakers are. Things could change between now and then, but as of now, in January, we're looking to do a program on emerging models of collaboration. Come in April, we're going to talk about continuity planning and emergency preparedness. July, our topic is succession planning. And then in October, we're going to be discussing organizational life cycles. So things to look forward to. Keep an eye on the Exton Chamber website, where we'll be listing all of these, and looking forward to seeing everybody in January.
Thanks, Bill. And thanks to all of the Nonprofit Council members who are on this call. Stephanie, you did a wonderful job moderating, and all of our partners, the Community Foundation and the Philadelphia Cultural Alliance. Thank you all for being here. You will receive a follow-up email and more information as soon as I collaborate it all or put it all together. But if we don't have any other questions or further ado, let's have a great Friday and, you know, do for our organizations and our mission. Have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.